Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Just Law, coming to you live as usual from our studios in West London. I'm your host, Saleh Ahmed. Today we're going to be discussing legal matters, but with a difference. It's to do with Islamophobia. A lot of our viewers are Muslims, and of course we experience, let's say, certain prejudices in the society and also in the media as a whole. I have two guests who are going to assist us with Islamophobia as a topic. And of course, later on, viewers can phone in and ask their own questions, maybe share their experiences and their ideas. So let me introduce my guests, inshallah. I have Shiplu Miah, who is from MEND. And later on, he will tell us what is MEND and what they do, etc. I also have Salman, who is from 21c, inshallah, Islam21c. So he will explain what that is and how we, what it is that they do. He's the chief editor. So inshallah, we can hear something from him. I'm going to start off with maybe defining what is Islamophobia, how does it affect Muslims, and then inshallah build from there. If you do have questions on other issues, you can call in and ask, inshallah. So if I start with Shiplu, you work for an organization called MEND. What is that?
MEND is a not-for-profit organization that was initially set up in 2008 that focuses on engaging and developing the Muslim community here in Britain in the field of media and politics. And a lot of the work that we do revolve around Islamophobia as well, Islamophobia that we experience in the media, as well as how that translates into actual Islamophobia in society.
Just for the viewers, what is Islamophobia?
Well, Islamophobia is basically any prejudice, discrimination, insult, attack that takes place on Muslims because of their faith. So it's not necessarily a dislike or a phobia against Islam per se. People can in this country insult or dislike Islam, but it's about how that translates onto Muslims. So when your hatred or dislike for the religion of Islam translates into discrimination, prejudice, or attacks on individual Muslims that belong to purely because of the faith. So it's how that translates onto Muslims individuals.
Okay, so essentially Islamophobia is, my understanding, phobia is something you don't like, and it's an irrational dislike of something.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Well, if we were to talk about how that's understood in law, when particularly how the police understand it, it's not the phobia of Islam. It's more accurately, perhaps, it's the phobia towards Muslim because of Islam.
So, for example, harassment, arson attacks, abusing someone because of their faith.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's a more sort of religiously aggravated sort of offenses.
And sometimes as Muslims we might perceive something to be Islamophobic, but it's not necessarily what is understood in law or by police to be Islamophobic. Okay. So someone can dislike or or insult Islam, but that won't be considered Islamophobic necessarily, but rather it's how the hatred or dislike of Islam translates into a discrimination, hatred, itself. Exactly, towards Muslims.
We'll discuss more on that later on. So Salman, from your perspective, what does your organization do, and how is it involved with Islamophobia or the protecting the Muslims, if you like?
Bismillah. Well, Islam21c.com. Our kind of slogan is articulating Islam in the 21st century, and what we do is we provide a space where scholars, intellectuals, activists, they can come together and shape the discussions surrounding the Muslim community, particularly in the 21st century, and particularly in the Western world. So most of our authors and readership is in the United Kingdom and the United States, although we do get viewers from over 200 regions across the world. Our aim, as I said, is more on the ideological aspect of things, so providing guidance and solutions.
Platform for discourse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Perhaps people can sort of write in their experiences. Perhaps they can report things that happen to them.
Yeah, we're open to all of these types of things, and many people have written, many of our authors have written about personal experiences, and also, cogent arguments for policies, for changes in the way we think and we deal with Islamophobia as well. And we work closely with many other organizations, Muslim and non-Muslim organizations, to meet this to reach this goal.
Are you exclusively online, or do you have events? Do you have talks in mosques, in university campuses?
Most of our activities are online through the website Islam21c.com, although we do have regular courses that are recorded by some scholars, regular talks that are broadcast as well. And also we've been starting in the last year or so doing panel discussions similarly to this on certain important issues that concern Muslims in the West.
And presumably you put that online so that viewers can share. Okay. In terms of MEND, I've heard of MEND before.
Yeah.
How long has the organization been running, and has there been successes?
MEND were formerly known as I Engage, and we were known that until about 2014, middle of 2014. We rebranded ourselves to MEND to reflect the different roles that we are now as an organization doing, such as primarily it's the focus now we have on actually engaging and developing the Muslim community, and so that's reflected in the change of our name. In terms of success, there is lots of things that MEND has taken place and considered themselves as accomplishments. One of them was the fact that MEND was the only Muslim organization in the country to be invited onto the Leveson inquiry regarding press regulation and its reformation, and all of the submissions and recommendations MEND has made were accepted by Lord Leveson, and actually he dedicated, I think, 8 pages to MEND's recommendations for that. And indeed all the changes that were put forward in the Royal Charter, many of them were from MEND's recommendation, and so that was a major achievement. And there are other achievements that I can say, and some of them is in the progress. In the process and ongoing progress. It's, for instance, the achievements we've made with regards to the police constabularies, the police forces, how they record Islamophobia. Prior to the work that MEND launched with regards to police forces, there was only about 2 forces in the country that recorded Islamophobia as a specific and separate hate crime, just as they do with anti-Semitism. But with the work that MEND has done, there is about, I believe, 10 to 13 forces now out of the, I think, about 40 or 43 forces in the country. So almost about 20% of the police forces now record Islamophobia as a separate hate crime.
Okay, brilliant. So if I can ask you further on this one, a lot of viewers are watching and they'll be thinking, right, how do I know if something is worth reporting or not? So if they were to dial 101 or if they were to call the police, how do they, at what point is it report worthy?
Well, what we need to do is whatever we perceive to be Islamophobic, we need to report that. We can let the police make a decision whether it's, whether it is or not. But as long as we report it to the police, they have a duty to record it as Islamophobia if the victim perceives it as Islamophobic. So it's better to report it than not, especially with regards to physical attack, verbal abuse, but even things like discrimination at workplace. Those things need to be reported to the police. And because, the Metropolitan Police say there's about 46% of all hate crimes go unreported, and there is it's evident that Muslims themselves don't report it as much as well. We don't have the facts to truly understand how bad the problem is in the country. We're basing it upon the stats that we have from the likes of Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police, but that's not sufficient to understand how bad the problem is nationally.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, viewers, you are watching live and you can call in and ask your questions, or perhaps ask our panelists what they feel about certain things. Has progress been made? Recently in Europe, for example, Pegida, or the incidents in France, or the, if you like, the Islamic politics in the Middle East, quite a few of these are contributing to at least discussions amongst the sort of, if you like, European populations. And sometimes Muslims are sort of put the question, why is all these things happening? Why are we seeing horrible stuff on TV in the name of Islam? Why are you not going out and demonstrating or distancing yourself from these events? And of course, some Muslims feel sort of, they're sort of cornered from all sides. They don't know what to say. It's not their fault. It's not their religion. There's misunderstanding. Perhaps sometimes the media it sort of hijacks an issue and sort of presents it in a way that Muslims may not agree with it. Of course, we want you to call in and put your views and thoughts. So inshallah, it is different than the usual show, but of course it is relevant, and it will inshallah educate the viewers as to what their rights and responsibilities are, what they can do, and perhaps share your experiences and gains and successes, what you've done. If you reported something to the police and you have something to say about that, please do give us a call. Our number's on the screen right now. I have a few questions of my own as usual, but I do want you to sort of call in and ask. I understand all of you speak Urdu. You speak Bengali?
Yeah, Bengali.
Okay, so we've got Bengali, we've got Urdu, we've got Arabic if you want to ask your questions in Arabic, inshallah. If you want to ask in English, that's fine, no problem. So, you know, do participate, inshallah. It is a common effort. It is something that as a community we have to do. Let's take the call, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother. My name is Saleh, calling from Canterbury.
Okay, what's your question, brother? Comment.
My question is, job के लिए problem हो गई थी. एक महीना में probation time में था. So क्या कर सकते हैं आप? उसमें कुछ help कर सकते हैं मुझे?
Okay, brother, it's not related to the topic, inshallah. If you call perhaps another episode, we'll be able to assist you. Right now we are talking about Islamophobia, the effects on the community, what the community can do. I have two guests who are in the field. I have Shiplu from MEND, an organization that was set up to, you know, deal and record Islamophobia and things against the Muslim community. Because I think as a community we have this tendency to let it pass. It's okay, it's their country, you know, and things like that. So we need to sort of have a situation where these things are not sort of brushed aside. The more you brush things aside, the bigger it gets, the more problematic it can become. And if you check the sort of recent events, what was far right, you know, sort of political parties, they are gaining momentum. You know, they were getting 2-3% of the vote, now they're getting 9 to 15, even 25% of the votes. If this trend continues, the Muslims are going to be cornered. And we need a good portion of Muslims really to participate, engage. MEND was called engage before. Isn't that right, Shiplu? Yeah. So we need people to engage and to sort of deal with the issue. And we have a lot of, you know, community members who are participating, who are engaging. But of course, this is not enough. We need to do more. You know, a lot of things happen online, and I think, Salman, I mean, from your experience, has things changed over the last 10 years?
A lot has happened in the last 10 years. I mean, obviously 9/11 had a tremendous impact on the global scene with regards to how Muslims are seen. 7/7 happened in the UK. One of the major problems that the Muslim community has suffered with is a very flawed understanding that has been portrayed and propagated of the causes of violence and the causes of terrorism. When we see, you know, you would have seen on an academic scale people talking about, you know, terrorism after 9/11, after 7/7. Academics, whereas academics, they would analyze terrorism and terrorist behavior and its causes. There's been a very different way to approach it in the media, in popular culture. Whereas instead of the host of complicated causal factors for violence and for so-called terrorism are considered, instead it's been spun into a question of a person's individual ideology. That rather than terrorism being caused by political grievances, war, famine, hunger, and so forth, for many different reasons, certain people have tried to push what has been shown now to be a fairy tale, that terrorism is caused by a person's beliefs and ideology. And what this has done is basically put a massive magnifying glass on the whole Muslim community, saying that, wait a second, if terrorism is caused by your beliefs, fair enough, we can just say that it's extreme Muslims or extremism in the Muslim community or within Islam. Then the Muslims are the ones who are to blame in this kind of in this paradigm, and this is what has led to a lot of excesses in terms of national security, surveillance, and so forth.
Okay. Perhaps the question is more for Shiplu, but I will start with you first. It's not the role of the media to educate the masses, surely. I mean, why should they dissect academically the issues? I mean, the role of the media is to perhaps incite in a way, not criminal way, but to sort of, if you never hear good news on the media, it's always something that's extreme, something that's gone wrong. They want sensationalism.
I agree with certain aspects.
In that understanding, I mean, you can't expect the media to say, oh, it's all great. It's always, they come in, they portray things for example, there was a child that didn't attend a birthday party, and his mother got a bill for £15.96 or whatever. Now that wasn't newsworthy in my view, but because it sort of, the concept of being billed for your child not attending a birthday party,
it's something
that took off. They didn't put it in bad light because there was no ulterior motives. So would you say the media has ulterior motives? I mean, is that what
we
you're
have
saying?
to be fair. So I mean, what this right now is the media as well. Okay, so we're broadcasting something. At the end of the day, somebody, in any type of medium, somebody has to pay the bills. Somebody is funding the cameras and the studios and so forth, and ultimately the people, the corporations that are funding those media companies, they're going to have interests.
So how do you deal with inherent bias, if I may call it that? So for example, let's say, I don't know, Sky News or BBC or any of the major sort of news outlets.
Dealing with the inherent bias or on a case-by-case level is a very, very important thing that we need to learn about, and I think Shiplu should be speaking about that more anyway, but shortly. But in terms of the overall perceived bias, the overall structure, this isn't going to necessarily change unless we as Muslims, when we see something provocative, when we see something extremely biased or not based on any solid facts, and we should complain. We should make an issue out of it. Okay. And you'll find
Inshallah,
that
in the second part we will discuss about what practical steps they can take and things like that. So Shiplu, from your experience, I mean, just like Salman has said, a certain organization, they have inherent bias, they have certain hands feeding them, etc., etc. And also media, news channels, it is about sort of giving it, bigging it up, so to speak.
Well, I think.
So where are they going wrong in this?
The question you asked was, why should they?
Their job is not to educate, so why should they dissect it academically?
I would slightly disagree with that, in the sense that I believe that the role of the media is to inform and educate.
So they have a public duty, so to speak.
In a healthy democracy, the function of the media, the news media, is to maintain a check and balance. That's effectively what the press should be, is to provide a check and balance against all the arms of government. So whether it's the judiciary, executive, legislature, so forth, is for the press to hold these powers, these structures of powers in place, and to provide information to the general masses. Now, if the press themselves are biased, let's just say, let's just forget Muslims for now, but if they are biased and they are not doing what they should be doing, which is to provide that check and balance in a healthy democracy, then the abuse of power can easily take place. And that's why we see sometimes that when the press, especially in the Levis inquiry, we saw how the press, the news media, are very close to the political establishment, which shouldn't be the case. They should be independent, and they shouldn't be able to influence each other. So in a healthy democracy, yes, the role of the press is to maintain check and balance, and that they should be impartial. They can't be biased, and they shouldn't focus in on one particular community more than they would on any other community. And if they do that, then what happens is there's that perception against that particular community. So for instance, the Muslims, the perception out there is that the Muslims are committing murders all the time, killing innocent people. But if we were to look at all the news items, and if we were to look at all the killings that take place around the world, then it can be clearly argued that the majority of the killings are taking place of innocent people by Western governments' armies, for instance. So drone attacks, they kill a lot of innocent civilians. Now, if that was to be plastered on news media, and if we were to focus our attention on that weeks upon weeks, as it has been, for instance, in the case of the Charlie Hebdo, then we would realize that, hold on, majority of the killings that are taking place out there of innocent people aren't being committed by Muslims, rather it's being committed by various types of individuals, and then the general public would have had a better and more balanced understanding of the actual reality.
Okay, you've hinted towards it, but what I'm trying to understand is, different sort of organizations have their different affiliations, yep, different funding arrangements, etc., etc. Now, would you say it's, I don't know, sort of attacking the Muslims has become somewhat fashionable? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, if we look at how the whole tabloid industry became popular in this country by Rupert Murdoch, is that he had the strategy of putting of news items that are related to scandals, related to almost sexualizing the contents and so forth. And you had the whole page 3, and that was all the basis was to increase sales. So the target, the primary function of these tabloids wasn't to report on news, rather it was to increase sales. And it can be argued definitely that what sells now is probably less, if I'm allowed to use the word in this program, but less of the stuff that we see on page 3 and more about demonizing Muslim community, because that seems to be what sells most now.
I see. Okay, if I can bring Salman onto this, private organizations, their primary objective is to make money. Now, these things are regulated. So if you are in broadcast industry, you have the Ofcom, and they have regulations of being impartial, not misleading, not misrepresenting, etc., etc. So how much of that is being adhered to, if you like, when it comes to Muslims?
Well, in terms of Ofcom, the rules are very different, because in terms of broadcasting, in terms of television and radio, it's literally beaming something across the airwaves. It's beaming something into your home. Therefore, the rules and regulations are much stricter. And although there are, of course, excesses that occur in TV and on the radio, once people complain about it to Ofcom, it's taken very seriously. The problem with print and the news and the press is it's a choice. You go out and buy a particular paper or magazine if you want to.
But surely,
so
if someone complains, don't they have a complaints procedure to take action?
For the press,
print media.
For print media, and this is what the Levinson inquiry has been about, and the whole pushing, organizations pushing like MEND, to push for a more meaningful set of regulations that are adhered to. At the moment, it's been almost pretty much self-regulating, and whereas it's very important, as you mentioned, in a thriving society, it's important for the press to be free to account, to hold the government or to the state to account. However, what's happened is, we have most, if not all, of the major news media in terms of the print. It's largely complicit with whatever happens to be the current kind of government procedures, and when they do go against that, as we saw with Guardian's publishing of leaked information from people like Edward Snowden, then they got in trouble. But when they're spying on people, when they're phone hacking,
but surely there is a limit to press freedoms. If it's going to affect national security, for example, then
this
they
is
have
the
a
argument,
legitimate right to.
So the point is,
prevent
so
certain data.
I would say that the more worrying part of this discussion is the whole pretext of national security.
Okay.
How
we'll come to that, inshallah. Viewers, you are watching Just Law. Today's format is slightly different than the usual format. we are discussing Islamophobia because it is a topic that affects all the Muslims. And if it has affected you, if you want to participate, if you want to call in and discuss, inshallah, share in our discussion, put your ideas and thoughts across. If you want to ask questions to our panelists here, I have Shiplu from MEND and I have Salman from Islam21c. And they have discussed a few issues. They've sort of highlighted certain things. Please do sort of participate with us and join our discussion. As you know, it is imperative as Muslim community that we do deal with these kind of issues head on. If you ignore it, it is not going to disappear. I do think in the next sort of 2 to 5 years, it will increase many folds. The British public, the British media, the British establishment, generally, they're not like the French. They don't come face to face. They don't tell you to your face. It's more subtle. People working in the police force, there's new sort of, if you like, guidelines coming out. The government's going to pass new laws to make certain things a criminal offense. They're going to sort of, if you like, read more people's emails, listening to phone calls. They're doing more and more in the name of national security or what have you. But the truth of the matter is the Muslim community are at the forefront of this, if I may call it an attack. Of course, it's not always an attack. They may have legitimate objectives to achieve by doing all this. Where they go too far is where we need to keep a check and balance. And where we feel they've gone too far, we need to tell them. And in Britain, you can tell them without fear. And if someone has harassed you, if they have said something Islamophobic, you have a duty to report it, not so that it doesn't happen again, but so that the person who's done it gets punished. And as a society, they realize where the lines are drawn and what things shouldn't happen. So if you feel fear or apprehension, or if you feel discriminated, don't suffer in silence. And MEND was an organization that was set up to perhaps see how much of that is happening. Islam21c to sort of give a platform where you can discuss and perhaps share knowledge and ideas. Even this channel, IQRA, as a broadcaster, we do want to encourage you to participate, to engage, to learn from each other. In this country, you can participate in the political sphere if you like. So do participate, do call in, do engage with us, inshallah. After the break, inshallah, when we come back, we're going to discuss what practical steps you can do. But on this segment, inshallah, we want to discuss as to what is happening, to sort of see what it is that's out there. In terms of the changes in Europe, because I think the politics in Europe is changing. And when the politics in Europe change, it will come to our shores. And of course, you have different individuals with different agendas. And to an extent, it seems that the Muslim community is somewhat like an orphan child, where people feel free to have a go at the child without fearing its parents coming back and sort of stopping them. How true is that?
It's an interesting metaphor. But I mean, the big news in Europe today is the ultra-left wing anti-austerity party coming to power in Greece. And this is a prime example of what austerity, what economic kind of problems they lead to in a society. So whereas this was a very fringe party only a few years ago, it's now in government. So a lot of questions are being asked today.
No, so if we say there's rapid political change in Europe, of course in Greece, I know quite a few Greek people, and they've been suffering financially. Mm-hmm. It was almost like having redundancy repeated over and over again. People were to some extent demoralized.
Yeah,
so they're looking for a change,
theme.
Whether it would deliver or not, that's a different question.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme. So in the UK, for example, we see crime as a big problem. We see unemployment as a massive problem. We see burden after burden on the healthcare system, and there are so many people who are angered by the state, the failures of the state to accommodate for basic needs and so forth. Their anger and their frustration is being directed to scapegoats, either by provocateurs among them or by media corporations or people acting in order to stay in power. So if an unfortunate byproduct of this is anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia. So people will blame the immigrants, people will blame the Muslims for the problems that they have, and as a result, you see parties like UKIP gaining in popularity because they represent a voice to the people who are so frustrated at the system, even though arguably they're not providing any real solutions. So what's happened in Greece is an extreme example, but you know, even much closer to home, this is something that is very possible, and it's a recurring cycle. You know, for example, the Nazi Party, they flourished and they gained prominence and power in Germany when right after World War I, when the country was devastated, the economy was in shatters. A strong society, a strong economy, a strong government that looks after its citizens, they are not in any threat of these, you know, fringe elements coming to the fore. However, if the government is failing, if people having to wait more than 4 hours or ever in A&E,
All right.
then
Okay,
there's frustration.
Salman, you've got a lot to say, inshallah. We are going to go to a break pretty soon, inshallah. We are just talking about Islamophobia, and we do want you to engage, inshallah, and discuss with us as to, you know, how it's affected you. Do you experience it in your workplace? Do you experience it when you go out? You know, have you had any experiences? If you've done if you've taken action, tell us what happened, what resolution what did you achieve, and etc. etc. So inshallah, we'll see you on the other side of the break. We are talking Islamophobia. Don't go anywhere, inshallah. I'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.